The gunshot that rang through the dusty streets of Whispering Creek sent Genevieve scrambling for cover, clutching her satchel to her chest as though it contained all the gold in California. It was 1873, and this small frontier town in Arizona Territory was supposed to be her sanctuary, not another place to flee from. Her heart pounded against her ribs as she ducked into the narrow alley between the general store and the telegraph office, the heels of her travel-worn boots slipping in the dirt. "You can run, but you can't hide forever." The voice belonged to a man she'd hoped she'd left behind in St. Louis, a debt collector working for her late husband's creditors. They believed she still had access to money that had never existed in the first place. Genevieve pressed her back against the rough wooden wall, willing her breathing to steady. 6 months she'd been on the run, changing her name in every town, working whatever honest jobs she could find. Laundress, seamstress, even a brief stint as a schoolteacher in a mining town where no one cared much about credentials. The dust of the road had permanently worked its way into her clothing, and exhaustion had become her constant companion. Another shot fired, this one splintering wood from the building across the street. Panic surged through her veins, hot and electric. She couldn't stay here. Gathering her skirts, she prepared to run again when a strong hand clamped over her mouth. "Quiet!" a deep voice commanded in her ear. "I'm trying to help you." She struggled against his grip until he slowly turned her to face him. Piercing blue eyes regarded her from beneath the brim of a well-worn Stetson. Dust coated his denim pants and the leather vest he wore over a simple cotton shirt. A 6-shooter hung at his hip, but it remained holstered. "Name's Samuel O'Brien," he whispered, slowly removing his hand from her mouth. "Sheriff's deputized me to help keep order while he's gone to Tucson. That fella shooting up my town doesn't seem particularly friendly. I reckon he's not shooting at tumbleweeds." Genevieve began, then stopped herself. The less the stranger knew, the better. "He's confused me with someone else." Samuel's eyes narrowed skeptically. "Madam, I've seen confusion before. That man's hunting, not confused." The sound of boots on the boardwalk made them both freeze. Samuel pressed a finger to his lips, then drew his pistol. He motioned for her to stay put as he peered around the corner. "There's a back door to the livery stable just down this alley," he whispered. "My horse is saddled inside. Get to it and wait for me." "Why would you help me?" Genevieve asked, suspicious of unexpected kindness. A half-smile crept across his face, revealing a dimple in his right cheek. "Let's just say I've got an aversion to men who shoot at women in my town. Now go." Genevieve hesitated only a moment before darting down the alley. She heard Samuel call out to the gunman, his voice carrying authority despite his lack of an official badge. As she slipped through the rear door of the livery, she could hear them exchanging words, but couldn't make out what was being said over the hammering of her heart. The stable was dim and smelled of hay and horse. A magnificent chestnut stallion stood saddled in one of the stalls, regarding her with intelligent eyes. Genevieve approached it cautiously, having little experience with horses despite months of stagecoach travel. The animal nickered softly as she stroked its neck. "Your master seems to trust me more than he should," she whispered to the horse. 5 minutes passed, then 10. Genevieve was considering whether she should leave on her own when the stable door opened. She pressed herself into the shadows, ready to flee, but it was Samuel who entered, holstering his pistol. "Your friend decided Whispering Creek wasn't worth his time," he said, approaching her. "I persuaded him that the next town over had better prospects." "He's not my friend," Genevieve replied sharply. Samuel studied her, taking in her travel-stained dress and the weariness etched into her face. "No, I don't reckon he is. What's your name, miss? Seems like I ought to know who I'm helping." Genevieve hesitated. Every name she'd used in the past 6 months flashed through her mind: Elizabeth in Denver, Margaret in Cheyenne, Catherine in the mining camp. She'd discarded identities like worn-out gloves. "I'd rather not say," she finally answered. Instead of being offended, Samuel nodded thoughtfully. "Fair enough. In these parts, folks sometimes have good reasons for keeping their business private." He paused, then added with that same half-smile, "Then I'll just call you mine." Heat rushed to Genevieve's cheeks. "That's rather presumptuous, Mr. O'Brien." "Not like that," he clarified, though his eyes twinkled with amusement. "It's what the old-timers call a stranger they've taken responsibility for. That's mine to worry about. Old trail boss I rode with used to say it." Despite herself, Genevieve felt her tension ease slightly. "And have you decided I'm your responsibility? Until I know you're safe." "Yes, madam, I have." He moved to his horse and checked the cinch on the saddle. "That man might circle back once he realizes I've misled him. I've got a cabin about 10 miles outside of town. We'll head there until things cool down." Genevieve straightened her spine. "I don't think—" "With all due respect, mine," Samuel interrupted. "You don't have many options right now. That fellow had killing in his eyes, and I don't fancy explaining to the sheriff why there's a dead woman in our town when he returns." As much as she hated to admit it, he was right. The debt collector wasn't likely to give up so easily, especially if he believed she still had access to her late husband's non-existent fortune. "Very well," she conceded. "But only until morning. Then I'll be on my way." Samuel nodded, seemingly satisfied with this arrangement. He helped her mount his horse, then swung up behind her. The proximity made her uncomfortable. She hadn't been this close to a man since her husband's death, but she said nothing as they rode out of town through a back trail. The Arizona landscape stretched before them, painted in shades of amber and rust by the setting sun. Saguaro cacti stood like sentinels against the darkening sky, and in the distance, craggy mountains jutted upward, purple shadows gathering in their crevices. Despite her circumstances, Genevieve couldn't help but be moved by the wild beauty surrounding them. "First time in the territory?" Samuel asked, his voice close to her ear. "Is it that obvious? You've got that look, like you're seeing something bigger than yourself for the first time." There was no mockery in his tone, only understanding. They rode in companionable silence for a while, the steady rhythm of the horse's hooves and the creak of the saddle the only sounds. Eventually, Samuel spoke again. "So, mine, what brings a lady like you to a dust trap like Whispering Creek?" Genevieve weighed her words carefully. "I'm looking for a fresh start. My husband died, and there was nothing left for me back east." It wasn't entirely a lie. Gerald Vollmer had indeed died, collapsing from a heart attack after learning that his investment scheme had collapsed. What he hadn't told her was that he'd borrowed heavily from dangerous men, using her family home as collateral. Within days of his funeral, the creditors had come calling, expecting her to make good on his debts. "I'm sorry for your loss," Samuel said sincerely. "The West is a good place for starting over. No one asks too many questions." "Except you," she pointed out. He laughed, a warm sound that rumbled against her back. "Fair point. I'll try to curb my curiosity." As darkness fell, a small cabin appeared in the distance, nestled against a rocky outcropping. A corral stood empty beside it, and a small creek gurgled nearby. It looked isolated but well maintained. "Home sweet home," Samuel announced as they approached. "It's not much, but it's quiet." The cabin was indeed modest, a single room with a stone fireplace, a narrow bed in one corner, a rough-hewn table with 2 chairs, and a small kitchen area. But it was clean and surprisingly cozy, with a colorful woven blanket draped over the bed and a shelf of books against one wall. "You read?" Genevieve observed, surprised. Samuel glanced at her as he lit a lantern. "Don't sound so shocked. Even cowboys need something to do during the long winter nights. Embarrassed, she turned away, examining the titles on his shelf. Whitman, Thoreau, and surprisingly several volumes of Shakespeare. Not what she would have expected from a frontier cowboy. "I'll sleep outside," Samuel said, gathering a bedroll from a trunk. "There's food in the pantry if you're hungry. Water's fresh from the creek." "You don't have to sleep outside," Genevieve protested automatically, then flushed when she realized how that sounded. "I mean, I know what you mean," he said, his expression unreadable in the lantern light. "But a gentleman doesn't share quarters with a lady unless they're married. My ma raised me better than that." Before she could respond, he stepped outside, leaving her alone in the cabin. Through the small window, she watched him unsaddle his horse and lead it to the corral, his movements efficient and practiced. There was something reassuring about his calm competence, a quality she hadn't encountered often in her privileged life back east. Genevieve explored the cabin, finding it better stocked than she'd expected. The pantry contained coffee, flour, beans, and jerky simple fare, but plenty of it. A trunk at the foot of the bed held extra blankets and a man's spare clothing. The entire space spoke of a man who lived simply but wasn't deprived. She was stirring a pot of beans over the fire when Samuel returned. He paused in the doorway, hat in hand, regarding her with surprise. "You didn't have to cook," he said. "It seemed the least I could do." She didn't add that it was the first time in months she'd felt safe enough to stop running, to perform a simple domestic task without fear. They ate in companionable silence, the beans supplemented with biscuits Samuel made with practiced ease. Afterward, as they sat before the fire drinking coffee, Genevieve found herself studying her unlikely protector. In the firelight, she could see the fine lines around his eyes, evidence of years squinting against the sun. His hands were calloused, his forearms corded with muscle beneath rolled-up sleeves. Yet there was a gentleness to him that belied his rugged appearance. "How long have you been in Whispering Creek?" she asked, breaking the silence. "About 3 years," he replied, staring into the flames. "Came west after the war. Tried my hand at a few things: cattle driving, mining, even bounty hunting for a spell. None of it felt right until I settled here." "You fought in the war?" He nodded, a shadow crossing his face. "Union cavalry. Saw things no man should see. When it ended, I couldn't go back to Pennsylvania. Everything looked different." Genevieve understood that feeling all too well. After Gerald's death, nothing had looked the same to her either. "What made you stay here?" Samuel considered this. "The space, I reckon. Room to breathe. No one telling me who I ought to be." He glanced at her. "Why are you running, mine?" The directness of the question startled her. "What makes you think I'm running?" "The way you hold yourself, always aware of the exits. The way you keep that satchel close." He nodded toward the bag she hadn't let out of her sight. "That's not just a lady traveling. That's someone expecting trouble to follow." Genevieve set down her coffee cup, suddenly weary of lies. "My husband left debts. The men he owed money to don't believe I don't have it hidden away. They've been persistent." Samuel's jaw tightened. "That man in town works for them," she confirmed. "They've followed me across 3 territories. Every time I think I've lost them, they find me again. Why not go to the law?" A bitter laugh escaped her. "The law? The men my husband owed money to own half the police force in St. Louis. And out here," she gestured vaguely, "out here, who would believe a woman over a man with money?" Samuel was quiet for a long moment. "I would," he finally said. The simple statement, spoken without hesitation, brought unexpected tears to Genevieve's eyes. She blinked them away, unwilling to show such vulnerability. "Thank you for the meal and shelter," she said, rising. But I should leave at first light. I've brought enough trouble to your town. And go where? Samuel asked, rising with her. If these men are as determined as you say, they'll keep coming. Then I'll keep running. Or, he said carefully, you could stop. Genevieve stared at him. Stop. Stay in Whispering Creek. Make a stand. I'm not the only one who'd help a woman being hounded unjustly. The offer was tempting, so tempting that Genevieve felt a dangerous hope rising within her. You don't know what you're saying. These men are dangerous. So am I, when necessary, Samuel replied, his voice level. And I know this territory better than any debt collector from back east. For a wild moment, Genevieve allowed herself to imagine it staying in one place, not looking over her shoulder, perhaps even building something resembling a life. But reality quickly reasserted itself. I can't ask that of you, she said firmly. I've spent one night in your town. You owe me nothing. It's not about owing, Samuel said, stepping closer. It's about doing what's right. And leaving a woman to face men like that alone isn't right by any measure I know. Before she could respond, a sound outside drew their attention, the distant but unmistakable approach of horses. Samuel moved to the window, peering out into the darkness. Riders, he said grimly. 3, maybe 4. Coming this way. Fear clenched Genevieve's stomach. How could they have found us so quickly? Someone in town must have talked. Samuel grabbed his rifle from above the fireplace and checked the load. There's a root cellar beneath that trapdoor. Get in it. Now. I won't hide while you face them alone, Genevieve protested. This isn't a debate, mine. His eyes locked with hers, intense and unwavering. I need to know you're safe, so I can deal with them properly. Something in his expression, determination mixed with concern, made her comply. Samuel helped her lift the trapdoor, revealing a small space beneath the cabin floor. It was surprisingly clean, lined with shelves holding preserved foods. Stay quiet no matter what you hear, he instructed, handing her the lantern. Don't come out until I call for you. As she descended the ladder, Genevieve caught his arm. Samuel, be careful. He gave her that half-smile again. Always am. That's why I'm still breathing. The trapdoor closed above her, and Genevieve was left in the dim lantern light, straining to hear what was happening. She heard Samuel's boots cross the cabin floor, then the sound of the front door opening. Muffled voices drifted through the floorboards, too indistinct to make out clearly. Then, after what seemed an eternity, she heard the unmistakable sound of a gunshot. Her heart nearly stopped. She pressed a hand to her mouth to stifle a cry, torn between fear for herself and concern for Samuel. More voices, raised now, followed by another shot. Then silence. Minutes ticked by, each one an agony of uncertainty. When the trapdoor finally opened, Genevieve nearly collapsed with relief at the sight of Samuel's face, illuminated by the lantern she held up. It's safe, he said, offering a hand to help her up. They won't be bothering you again. As she emerged from the cellar, Genevieve saw that his shirt was torn at the shoulder, a red stain spreading across the fabric. You're hurt. Just a graze, he dismissed, though she could see him favoring that arm. I've had worse shaving. What happened? Who were they? Samuel guided her to a chair before answering. Your debt collector and 3 hired guns. They'd been asking about you in town, offering money for information. Barman at the saloon remembered seeing us ride out together. And now? She asked, dreading the answer. I convinced them that continuing to pursue you would be hazardous to their health. The grim set of his mouth told her more than his words. They're riding back to where they came from, minus their weapons and with a message for their employers. What message? That Genevieve Vollmer died 6 months ago in a stagecoach accident outside of Denver. That they've been chasing a ghost. Hearing her real name spoken aloud after so long made Genevieve start. "How did you—" "Your initials," Samuel explained. "They're embroidered on your handkerchief. I saw it when you were cooking." The man asked for Genevieve Vollmer. Wasn't hard to put together. Embarrassment flooded her. Such a simple oversight after months of careful deception. "So now you know who I am." "I know your name," Samuel corrected gently. "I don't presume to know who you are." That takes time. The implication that he wanted that time hung between them, unspoken but clear. "You think they believed you?" she asked, returning to the more pressing concern. "About my being dead?" "I was persuasive," Samuel said, his tone leaving no doubt about the nature of that persuasion. "And I gave them proof to take back to their employers." "What proof?" He reached into his pocket and withdrew a her locket, which had contained a miniature portrait of her as a young woman. It had been in her satchel. "I hope you don't mind. I needed something they'd recognize." "You went through my belongings?" Indignation flared briefly. "To save your life," he reminded her. "I returned everything else." He nodded toward her satchel, sitting untouched beside the bed. The fight went out of her. He was right, of course. And if his plan worked. "Do you really think it's over?" Samuel sat across from her, wincing slightly as his injured arm touched the table. "Men like that care about money, not justice. If they think you're dead, there's no profit in continuing to search for you. They'll move on to their next victim." Hope, dangerous and fragile, bloomed in Genevieve's chest. "And if you're wrong? Then we'll deal with that when it comes." He reached across the table, his hand stopping just short of hers. "But for now, you're safe in Whispering Creek. If you want to stay." The offer hung between them, weighted with possibilities. Genevieve studied Samuel's face, searching for ulterior motives, for the kind of calculation she'd grown accustomed to in Gerald's world of business and social climbing. But all she found was sincerity and something else, a spark of interest that had nothing to do with debt or danger. "Why would you do this for a stranger?" she asked. Samuel considered his answer carefully. "When I came west after the war, I was lost, carrying things no man should have to carry. A stranger helped me when I needed it most, gave me a chance to build something new. I'm just passing that chance along." It was the most honest answer anyone had given her in years. Genevieve felt something shift inside her, a wall beginning to crumble. "I don't know how to stop running," she admitted quietly. "It's become a habit." "Well," Samuel said, finally allowing his hand to cover hers, "habits can be broken, with time and patience." His touch was warm, his calloused palm a reminder of the hard work that had shaped his life. So different from Gerald's soft, manicured hands. So much more real. "I don't have much to offer," Genevieve said. "No money, no property. Just a satchel of clothes and too many secrets." "Whispering Creek doesn't ask for references," Samuel replied with a smile. "And as for secrets, well, everyone's entitled to a few." The fire crackled in the hearth, casting dancing shadows across the cabin walls. Outside, the vast Arizona night stretched to the horizon, filled with stars brighter than any Genevieve had seen in St. Louis. For the first time in months, the tight knot of fear in her chest began to loosen. "I could stay," she said, the words feeling like a pledge. "For a while." Samuel's smile deepened, revealing that dimple again. "I was hoping you'd say that, mine." "You can't keep calling me that," she protested, though without much conviction. "Why not?" "It suits you." His thumb traced a gentle pattern on the back of her hand. "Unless you'd prefer I use your real name?" Genevieve considered this. The woman who had been Genevieve Vollmer seemed distant now, a privileged socialite who had never known true hardship or true kindness. The woman sitting in this cabin, contemplating a new beginning, Was someone different? No, she decided. Not yet. Let Genevieve rest a while longer. As you wish. Samuel nodded, understanding in his eyes. Mine it is, then. The name no longer sounded presumptuous. Instead, it felt like a promise of protection, of possibility, of something neither of them was ready to name but both could feel taking root. 3 months later, Genevieve stood on the porch of the general store in Whispering Creek, watching a dust cloud approach from the east. The stagecoach was right on time, a rare occurrence that the town's residents would discuss with great interest over dinner. In the 3 months since she decided to stay, Genevieve had carved out a place for herself in the small community. Her skill with a needle had earned her a position as the town's seamstress, working from a small room at the back of the general store. The work was steady, the pay modest but enough to rent a small cabin near the creek. Samuel had been true to his word. No debt collectors had appeared to threaten her newfound peace. Whether they truly believed she was dead or had simply decided she wasn't worth the trouble, Genevieve couldn't say. But as the weeks passed without incident, she'd gradually stopped looking over her shoulder, stopped starting at every unfamiliar face. And through it all, Samuel had been there, a steady presence, never pushing, never presuming, but always nearby. They'd taken to having Sunday dinners together, sometimes at his cabin outside town, sometimes at hers. They'd ridden into the desert to see ancient rock paintings, picnicked by the creek, and spent long evenings discussing the books they both loved. It was the most honest relationship Genevieve had ever known with a man. Samuel knew her secrets, or most of them, and hadn't judged her for them. He'd seen her at her most frightened and vulnerable, and it hadn't diminished his respect for her. If anything, it had strengthened the connection growing between them. The stagecoach rumbled to a stop before the hotel, passengers disembarking with weary relief. Genevieve watched them with only mild interest until a familiar figure emerged from inside the general store to stand beside her. "Expecting someone?" Samuel asked, his shoulder brushing hers as he leaned against the porch post. "Just enjoying the spectacle," she replied with a smile. "And the knowledge that I don't have to get back on that contraption anytime soon." Samuel chuckled. "Never was much for stagecoach travel myself. Too confining." They stood in comfortable silence, watching as the passengers collected their luggage and dispersed, some to the hotel, others to the saloon, a few greeted by waiting family members. "I've been thinking," Samuel said after a while, his tone casual though Genevieve sensed an undercurrent of tension. "The sheriff's offered me a permanent deputy position." "That's wonderful," Genevieve said sincerely. "You deserve it." "It means staying in town more." He glanced at her. "Might be time to sell the cabin, get a proper house here." "You love that cabin?" she pointed out, puzzled by this sudden change of heart. "I do," he agreed. "But I've been thinking it's time for something different." "Something?" He hesitated, then finished. "Something shared." The implication hung between them, clear but unspoken. Genevieve felt her heart quicken. "Samuel, you don't have to answer now," he said quickly. "It's just an idea. For the future." Before she could respond, the general store owner called her name, needing assistance with a customer. Genevieve excused herself, grateful for the interruption that gave her time to gather her thoughts. That evening, as the sun set over Whispering Creek, painting the desert in gold and crimson, Genevieve walked to the small church at the edge of town. She hadn't been religious since childhood, but something about the quiet sanctity of the empty building called to her. Inside, the air was cool and still, scented with beeswax and aged wood. She sat in a pew near the back, trying to make sense of the emotions churning within her. Samuel's veiled proposal, for that's what it had been, had awakened both longing and fear. She wanted what he offered, more than she'd allowed herself to admit. But accepting meant truly putting down roots, committing to a future here, to a life with him. "Thought I might find you here," a voice said softly from the doorway. Samuel stood there, hat in hand, his expression uncertain. "Mind if I join you?" Genevieve nodded, making room on the pew beside her. He sat, leaving a respectful distance between them. "I didn't mean to pressure you earlier," he said. "Sometimes my mouth runs ahead of my good sense." "You didn't pressure me," she assured him. "You just surprised me." "I surprised myself," he admitted with a rueful smile. "Had a whole speech planned for next week, after the town dance." Despite her turmoil, Genevieve smiled. "A speech? That doesn't sound like you." "Well, a man doesn't ask a woman to marry him every day." Seemed like the occasion called for some preparation. The directness of his words both thrilled and terrified her. "Is that what you're asking? For me to marry you?" Samuel turned to face her fully, his blue eyes intent in the fading light that filtered through the church's windows. "Yes, mine. That's exactly what I'm asking." "But you don't even know my real name," she protested weakly. "I know who you are," he countered. "I know you're brave and resourceful. I know you work hard and care about doing things right. I know you love Shakespeare and can't abide coffee without sugar. I know your laugh and your frown and the way you look in moonlight." He took her hand, his touch gentle but sure. "Names are just words. What matters is the person behind them." Tears pricked at Genevieve's eyes. In that moment, she realized that the woman she had been, the society wife, the frightened widow, was truly gone. In her place stood someone stronger, someone who had survived and adapted and found her way to this place, to this man. "Genevieve," she said quietly. "My name is Genevieve." Samuel smiled, the dimple appearing in his cheek. "It's a beautiful name, but I think I'll still call you mine, if that's all right with you." "It's more than all right," she whispered, and closed the distance between them. Their first kiss was gentle, a promise exchanged in the quiet sanctuary of the empty church. When they parted, Genevieve felt as though something fundamental had shifted within her, a final piece falling into place. "Is that a yes?" Samuel asked, his voice husky. "Yes," Genevieve answered without hesitation. "Yes to marriage, yes to a house in town, yes to whatever future we build together." Outside, the last light of day gave way to the vast starlit canvas of the Arizona night. But inside the church, Genevieve had found something brighter than any star, a love born of compassion and respect, of seeing and being seen. For the first time since she'd fled St. Louis, she was no longer running from something. Instead, she was running toward a future, a home, a life that was truly her own. And beside her, holding her hand as they walked back into town, was the man who had first called her mine, the name that had become not a claim of possession, but a declaration of belonging. In Whispering Creek, under the endless western sky, Genevieve had found not just safety, but something she'd never truly had before: the freedom to be herself, known and loved for exactly who she was.